We'll go ahead and call it to order. And let's see. Gary's not here. Theo's not here.
Gary is excused. He called or sent me an email saying that he was going for that.
Okay.
Theo.
Just to make sure that I get it today and next month, I will not be in country for the May meeting. Should be back in time for the June meeting, but I will not be in country for the May meeting.
Who's our vice chair?
Okay.
Oh, cool. All yours. I expect great things.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Nathan what we signed him up for the last time. Okay, so I guess roll call, we know who's here and who's not. So has everyone had an opportunity to look over last month's meeting?
They look good to me.
They look good to me.
That was the first. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Any discussion? Now, all those in favor?
Yep.
So the meeting minutes unedited are good to go. So we move on to Miss Bailey for the budget overview.
Anita, can you let me share content? Or can you? Are you the host? No.
Yes, I'm working on that right now. Rob has control right now.
I'll try to drive for him. Most work. Okay. Sorry. Sometimes the mouse is too far away from the computer, so yeah. All right. Now let's see. There's great. Okay. All right. Okay, so Rob asked me to give a budget overview. So I dug up this slideshow that we did a few years ago, and I just updated it, so it might be old news for some of you guys. So what I'm gonna talk about is just basically how the airport budget works, and go over revenues and expenditures, and then where we are. So airports by FAA guidance are supposed to be self-supporting, so they sort of function like an enterprise fund and other programs at the city. So we have local sources of revenue. The city owns the land at the airport and leases land to privately owned structures. So we have land lease revenue, and then we also have a few city-owned buildings like the Open Tea hangars that we also lease. So lease revenue combined accounts for about half of the operating revenue for the airport. Then we have the FBO contract, which is under a separate agreement. So it's the lease of the building, and then there's a fuel flowage rate that we get a percentage of the fuel sales. And that accounts for about 20% of the revenue this fiscal year. Space rental, that's an internal program. So other city departments lease space at the airport, and we charge them for that. So that accounts for about 15%. And then we do have tie down fees, but as you know, we don't have a whole lot of aircraft that tie down separately. So that's just a tiny amount. And that's the revenue that funds the operating costs of the airport.
That sentence implies it breaks even.
No,
Oh.
it just says that's the source, those are the sources of revenue for the operating costs of the airport. Other sources of revenue that the airport program as a whole gets are grant funding. So grant funding, most of our grant funding comes from the FAA. Our airport is considered a non-primary airport, and so we get annual entitlement funds. Every non-primary airport gets the same amount, $175,000 a year. And that money is, we can only use that money if approved by the FAA for projects at the air side of the airport. We also have access to discretionary grants through the FAA. So let's say we have a project that's going to cost more than we have available in non-primary entitlement funds. We can apply for a discretionary grant. Discretionary grants are competitive. So you're not guaranteed that money. You have to compete against all other grant applications of that type across the country. Maybe 10 years ago or so, the state passed created a funding program that has a couple of different types of funds. It's, the revenue for that comes through state aviation fuel taxes. The pot of money that our airport is eligible for are called core grants. And there's different categories of core grants. What we've been successful in getting core grants for is to provide most of the match for the FAA grants. So FAA grants, actually back up a second. Whenever we do an FAA funded project, FAA grants used to pay 95%, you had a 5% local match, and then I don't remember how many years ago they changed it to 90-10. So the local match percentage went up, so we had like 10% local match. And then during COVID, they suspended that and they were 100% funding airport projects because they were just trying to basically get people to work essentially during that time period, but that's gone away. So we're back to 90-10 on FAA grants. So the core grants will pay 90% of the 10%. That makes sense. So it helps us with our local match requirement. And then recently the bipartisan infrastructure legislation that the federal government passed included some pots of money for aviation projects. And so it has various categories of restrictions, but we're able to get some bill money for some types of projects. In addition to that, we have transient lodging tax revenue. So this is really where our local match comes from. So the city collects lodging tax from all the hotels in town, and the airport gets a portion of that. It goes into the capital program and is used as our local match for these grant-funded projects.
Do you know what that percentage is?
The percent that we get of the TLT,
Correct.
I don't know off the top of my head. It's changed over the years.
Did we get any projects done when we had 100% coverage?
We've never gotten 100% of the TLT revenue.
Or are you talking
It
about?
flexes every
I
year.
think he means from the FAA.
Oh, yeah, we did do 100% FAA food project.
What was,
Yeah, I believe that was AWAS.
that was, okay.
Yes, sir.
Has there ever been any investigation of getting FEMA grants for the emergency, response for emergency situations in case the big one happens?
Yeah, our airport is not on the, it's not an emergency airfield as defined by the state. There are emergency airfields that are defined by the state, and Albany is not one of them. We've talked with our local emergency manager about looking into that, but it didn't look super promising, so we can look into it some more, but we're not currently listed as an emergency airport for the state. Probably because
The runway,
our runway length is
it's so short, yeah.
Yeah, and everything, we try to get the runway longer, no.
So the other thing about, all of this money goes towards capital projects. So the FAA funding will pay for FAA, capital projects. Not every capital project is eligible for FAA funding, so if we have a capital project that's not an FAA project, then, our only source of local funding is the TOT funds. So that's that fund.
So, that 90/10 that we need to cover, is that part of the $175,000 a year we get?
Yeah, so the way it works is, it's kind of weird because the non-primary entitlement, makes it seem as if they give you this money and you decide what to do with it, but that's not at all what happens. So it goes into an account essentially for the Albany airport, and, let's say we had a $500,000 project, we could save that money up for several years until we had enough money, and then we would have to pay 90% of that out of the non-primary funds, and the other 10% would have rising lodging tax revenue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so 18 grand is covered by the court grants, right? Then we have to come up with another $1,000 from TLT.
If we got a core grant approved for that, so it's a series of grant applications and approval processes. Yeah.
Okay. Does that apply to both the discretionary grants and the non-primary entitlement funds?
Yes.
Okay.
They're both 90/10. Okay. On the expenditure side of the sheet, on the operating program, our primary expenditures are personnel costs. So we have a fraction of a full-time equivalent position, which is Rob's airport manager position. So he's paid partially out of the airport operating budget, mostly out of the street fund for the bulk of his work. Other O&M costs are typical things you might expect. So we have power, the fuel system costs, the city owns the fuel system. We have maintenance on the airfield, just normal stuff. O&M costs, insurance. Well, overhead, it includes insurance, all of our finance and HR costs, and we have a pretty significant charge for the stormwater fee. So stormwater charges are based on impervious surface, and as an airport, you have a lot of impervious surface, and so we pay a lot in stormwater fees. It's kind of a little bit weird because the city runs the stormwater, like I run the stormwater program, and I'm responsible for the airport. So the airport has asked the stormwater people there's an ability to get a credit for your stormwater charges if you have a state issued water quality permit, 1200Z permit, which the airport is required to have, and is effectively managed and is in compliance with. And so since we're in good standing with DEQ on our 1200Z permit, we can give ourselves a break on the stormwater charges. The same goes for any industry. So we have some other industries in town that have requested a similar credit for their 1200Z permit. So some of the industries down here out Pacific. Anyway, so we're treating ourselves like we do others, but that helps a little bit with the stormwater charge. And then there's a transfer to street maintenance because street maintenance staff does all of our maintenance work at the airport. So whenever they do work, they bill us for their hours, and then there's an internal transfer that happens to pay us. So it's the primary categories of operating expenditures. I'll just say we have eliminated every single operating expenditure we can without not doing things.
What percentage is?
On the capital side, in the capital program, we only have capital expenses when we have a capital project. So some years there won't be any capital expenditures. We'll be saving up our funds in a reserve line. Other years we'll have a project or two programmed. The capital expenditures covers all the capital costs from soup to nuts. And depending on the project, it could be FAA, state, and local funds. Sometimes it's just only local funds. And as I said, we don't do capital projects every year. We don't have the funding to do capital projects every year. So we have saved up some money in our capital budget over the years from the TLT revenue that we haven't had to fully expend. Our operating expenses are growing faster than our operating revenue. So that's a huge problem right now. The TLT revenue, as I mentioned, it both matches the grants and it's our only funding when we don't have grant funded projects. We save our non-primary entitlement funding, and then we have a CIP, an air CIP that we have to review with the state and FAA, and they approve it. So it's a 5-year capital improvement program. And that will, it's not written in stone, but it tentatively schedules out our capital projects over time. And it helps the state and the federal government understand when we'll be using our funds. And then FAA funds generally do not pay for landside projects. So if we need to put, there's a hangar door that's broken in Tony's building, or want to build a hangar or do anything on the land side, typically you can't get FAA funding for that. Sometimes you can under certain programs, but it's not guaranteed. So as I mentioned, our operating expenses are growing faster than our operating revenue. So most of our operating revenue comes in the form of lease revenue, which are under long-term leases that only grow at the CPI. Our other expenses don't stuck at such a low growth rate, so our expenses are tended to grow faster than our revenues. Our total operating expenditures for this biennium, the city works on a biennium, so 2-year budget, $365,000. Our available operating revenue we forecasted at $338,000. That's pretty firm forecast. The only variable in there would be like fuel flowage. Varies slightly from year to year, but the lease revenue is pretty well set, which leaves us with an operating shortfall of $26,700. So we transferred some money, some TLT funds to cover it for this biennium. However, that's not really the actual deficit, because for a long time we had contingency funds, a contingency fund on the operating revenue, operating budget that we're drawing down quite a bit years and years ago, and then we managed to stabilize the airport and not draw down our contingency for several years. And now it's falling again. So that it'll be fully consumed in year 2 of the biennium. The actual operating deficit per year is about $90,000, and growing because, as I said, our operating expenditures are growing at a faster rate than our available revenue. So, not good news. Whoever said I was here with good news is
Debbie.
yeah. I don't think it was Debbie. Debbie knows better than me.
So you're saying that total available operating revenue, $338,000, that's for 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you just divide it in half, you're looking at around $170,000 a year. So the true annual deficit, you're saying it's $260,000? I mean, our expense is $260,000 a year if we're deficit by $90,000?
Not following your math.
So
the true deficit, so we made up the difference. We had $180,000 or something left in our contingency fund at the start of this biennium. Is that right? If you look. And we're fully using that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I mean, the number wise, if it's $170,000 a year, that's revenue. And you're saying the true annual deficit is 90,000 per year and growing.
Yeah.
So, basically, okay, I'm sorry. Then the total operating expense is 365,000.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out, I mean, what the actual expense is per year.
The actual expenditures of the budget are, well, over 2 years, $365,000.
Yeah, so if it's, for every year, it's,
180.
180,000.
Yep, so about half,
So,
about half sugar.
yeah,
50%.
So what we did this biennium is we had, at the beginning of the biennium, we had $148,000. So in the reserve. It took, all of that $148,000 plus another $26,000 to make up the deficit in the biennium. So it took 100 and whatever, I don't know, about like $70,000. But when you forecast out the second year of the biennium, in the second year of the biennium, we needed $63,000 of that contingency, which took it down to zero, and we needed an additional $26,700. So the deficit in the second year of this biennium is $91,000, basically.
Sure, it'll be 180 plus.
That is next year. So we're currently in fiscal year 23-24, first year of the biennium. We have enough contingency money to pay for this year. No worries. Next year is when we run out of our contingency a little bit shorter. At the end of the fiscal year 24. So the second year of the biennium. So we built this budget knowing that we had to figure something out by the end of the biennium. In the past, what we did was not sustainable and not really even appropriate. Some of you have been around for a long time. When I was airport manager, one of the things we did is we took my portion of my FTE that was paid out of the airport and moved it completely out. So the airport was paying no personnel costs. I don't know if you guys remember that. Which doesn't mean that I was not working on the airport stuff, of course. Just it was being subsidized by other operating public works funds.
can we do that again?
I mean, can we? Yes. Should we? I don't know. Maybe.
An impact with that many those for, I mean,
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, city employees are expensive. No,
Find it all retired.
it wouldn't make it up. No. So Rob is paid about $54,000 a year out of the airport for all of his. That includes all of his like benefits and salaries and salary costs. So it doesn't fully make it up. So what are we doing? Well, we have talked about it a lot internally. We've talked with some consultants, and we have been reassured that we're not the only people in this situation. We've talked with the FAA, and they're like, figure it out, so what our next steps are, you guys might remember we did have a business study done by those business school students. Does anybody remember? And we can share that result. That was before Tony was here because we were without an FBO at that time. It's one of the questions is how to get an FBO. It's one of the questions we posed to them. Essentially, their conclusion, that report's available if anybody wants to read it, but their conclusions are basically, the airport is highly constrained and it's operating on, even if we had an FBO, the FBO would be operating on such a narrow margin.
Oh, yeah.
That
Divide that margin by half and we're really talking.
yeah, so they weren't sure we would ever be able to attract an FBO that could remain in business. But if we did, we would need to offer them incentives, like not charging them the market rate for rent, and other various things to try to help the FBO maintain their bottom line. And so various things. So they were pretty pessimistic, the study. There's not an obvious answer to generating more revenue at the airport. So can we raise the land lease rates? That's like the first thing everybody, raise the rates. Well, the land leases are locked up in long-term leases. They can only be opened if both parties agree. The earliest one is 2029 or something like that is when the first one expires, and we could change the lease rate. Those leases do go up by CPI according to the lease, so there's that. We can raise the lease rates for the city-owned buildings, which we've done. We've raised the T-Hunter rent, I don't know how many times in the last few years. Once we add power, maybe we can raise those rates even further because it'd be slightly more attractive. But you end up at a certain point, there's some users of our airport that need an affordable place to park their plane, right? So you gotta think about that. What else? Oh, encouraging development of additional structures in the airport where we can have new lease revenue. It's definitely something that we're looking into. We are trying to find somebody that can help us generate some interest in the economic development of the airport. We have access to a little bit of money where we could do some things to maybe incentivize some hangar construction, which would help. I don't.
Good things.
So we might be able to extend water or sewer utilities. The Eco-Devo people are like, do their environmental work for them. Well, you know, that just depends on what the proposed project is as to what that actually means. But we could maybe fund some of that study to try to encourage development. Years and years ago, before I was involved, the city offered breaks on the first however many years of lease revenue if you built a hangar. That would be the opposite of helpful for us, but you know, something we consider. So various things. Let's see, what else? What are other things we've talked about? We're gonna reach out to the state. It's on my list of things to do this week, and talk to them about, you know, other airports that are similarly situated. What are they doing? Can we reach out to them and figure out maybe somebody has a brilliant idea? So where this is headed is, it's not sustainable. Okay, I'm going to say something. Don't shoot me. Okay, I'm just passing on a message. Some of you were around when the mayor made some unfortunate comments about the airport a couple years ago, and that, you know, there might be, I forget how he said it, but something along the lines of there might be a better use for that land. And so that is in the city strategic plan is an objective that says something along the lines of determine the best use of this property, the airport property, for the community. Now that doesn't mean the airport should be closed. It just means determine the best use. So operating on the direction of the mayor and council, probably what we're going to do is hire a consultant, use some of our capital funds to pay for a consultant to do. There are consulting firms that do economic viability studies and plans for similar airports. And the question is, what can we do? Like, analyze our airport and our situation and tell us what we need to invest in. And, can we make investments, enough investments to continue to use the airport resource? What should we do? So that, I think, is our next step. This might be opening up some old wounds, and I'm sorry if it does, but for those of you that are new, you might not know that there's a long history here. And back in the late 90s, the city manager at the time had contacted the FAA and said, we no longer want to have an airport. Take us off of your list, right? We're going to close the airport. And that led to a firestorm of concern. And so he withdrew his letter, and the city council passed a resolution that said the city of Albany commits to supporting the Albany Municipal Airport for the next 20 years. We're going to give it our best shot. And so that was in the year 2000. And, for various reasons, we've done a lot of work. We updated the master plan. We had a plan to get a displaced threshold. Pretty much immediately after that plan was approved and adopted, the FAA said we're no longer allowing displaced thresholds. So that went out the window. It's just a tough situation. So what we are doing is gonna find some people who know about these things and get the best advice we can to figure out what our best option is to continue using the airport.
And they might say it's time to go.
Well, probably they might say that the city of Albany would have to supplement the airport budget to continue its operation in some other way. Right, well, Chuck is also, yeah, so, and that could be, that will be the council's decision. Like if the answer is city council has to allocate more, for instance, transient lodging tax funding or something to the airport. Everybody wants TLT money. If you've been involved in that, everybody wants TLT money. It's no strings attached. Then, the council has to decide to do that.
Part of the problem, as I understand it, is because of the road structure that constrains the airport, we're hamstrung by DOT in that we can't restructure the roads that permit a proper extension of the runway, which would get more, though some people are going to complain about the noise, it's going to get more business jet activity in here.
Jets are quieter than piston-driven planes.
Well, and bigger pistons, yeah. But when we're looking at the city attracting bigger businesses, those folks want to be able to come in close to their business, do their business, and then get out. If you make them drive to Salem or to Corvallis or Eugene, they're not bringing their business in here. So the airport can be used as a business attractor. Now, is it going to be a balance? Maybe not. But the mere fact that you've got a viable airport does make Albany more attractive than Scioto. Scioto doesn't have anything. What business is going to go to Scioto?
How do you add 2,000 feet to do that runway
Well,
when you have
see,
the off ramp there?
And the part of the problem that we can't add is because of the bloody highway.
Well, you have you have the highway, you have that road right there.
Not only that, is that, I was told that you have Corrales Airport, you have Salem, and you have Eugene there as well. There's,
And where's the business is gonna go? They're gonna go where those boys are. And if you want to attract any business to Albany, you either give them a game or just say, not it.
Well, that's, you know what, that's something right, because if you go on that flight tracker app, you can see where the planes come from, and you see a lot of planes come from down south up to Eugene, up to Salem, and they hop back home. So they're flying with, you know, with like some sort of business stuff.
Mhm.
So.
Chris, well,
He was first.
He doesn't have time. Is there somebody on city staff that can research FAA or FAA and find out how we could get, the only way we increase revenue is to build more hangars. What if we ask the city's grant person to look into FAA grants, to write a grant so that it would pass through FAA and we could build a hangar? The city could go into debt to build a hangar because the revenue would offset a portion of that cost virtually immediately. I mean, if you rent it for if you built a 10-place hangar, that's $3,000 a month, that's $36,000 a year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely an option. I mean, the city is hiring a new grants person. And so we can definitely look into that. I don't know that it would. I think probably what would happen is we would have to piece together multiple things. And so that is one of the pieces, yeah.
how many, people do you have on your waiting list for hangar?
I just went through and one opened up, and I had probably about 16.
Yeah, I got like 30.
And when I went through that list,
Some of them
I'm
might
down
be
to about probably 5 now. Everybody dropped off, found something else.
Well, I gotta tell you guys, I mean, you know, we're building hangars in Chehalis. But, I mean, the cost is so ridiculous that that's why no one's building hangars. I mean, even if you run water, sewer, it doesn't even matter. That's rounding error at that
Did
point.
you have to pay for environmental?
No, they paid for the environmental. And, I thought, you know, it was gonna take a long time, but they were done with it in a month. So, I mean, you know, it's actually Brandon, he's the, I think the chair for Washington Aviation Department.
Okay.
And, or no, WAMA, Washington Aviation Managers Association. So, yeah, I mean, he was very helpful and, you know, he knew what was going on. I guess it wasn't his first rodeo.
Right.
And then, so, yeah, everything got done. But, I mean, I gotta tell you, we're building a 12-unit hangar, T-hangar, and at the end, it's gonna cost me $1.4 million. So $30,000 a year doesn't make sense. That's why no one builds it,
I see.
you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, 30,000 plus the utilities and taxes, insurance and all that. I mean, yeah, that's why no one builds it.
I care about it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tony, I understand that the few business jets that do come into Albany, when they get ready to depart, they don't take on a lot of fuel because they can't get out
Yeah.
if they did.
Yeah, exactly.
How much more runway would they need in order to take on not even a full load, but let's say 50% or 75%?
You know, I
General.
never asked them about what's required. I would always say, hey, do you need some fuel? Like, no, we're going to be maxed out, so we can't take any fuel. Okay, well, that's the extent of my conversation with them about that. But, you know, it's not like we get jets. It's usually turboprops. So, you know, I mean, they don't need as much length as a jet. But, yeah, I think they just need to be stay below a certain level threshold for their operational procedures.
So in your experience, how much more runway do you think would be beneficial to the airport?
You know, I mean, if we want to target the business, like, you know, the business aircraft, then, ideally it would be like 4,000 feet.
Yeah.
At a minimum, you know? But, you know, small turboprops could come in even now, but they just can't take off with it. It's the power lines on the north side and the south side that kind of killed the whole thing. So, yeah, I mean, ideally it'll be 4,000 feet, but I mean, you know, anything's better than what we have now.
There's a discussion in the master plan that's online that you guys are welcome to look at about that and the displaced threshold project. And it talks about the categories of aircraft that it would open up to. I don't remember off the top of my head, but you might find that information in the master plan.
So, but, you know, when we were working on the threshold, when we're making the overrun into a threshold, I think, the FAA rejected it because we didn't have enough air, you know, pilots saying, well, signing saying, you know, they can't take off or they didn't come into Albany because of the runway length. And we were just trying to get funding for the connector, right? I mean, because
Well, they wouldn't fund the connector because they displaced threshold. So you don't need, I mean, we could build a new connector down at the south end. Is that what you're trying to find? We had that little holding area. Yeah, so it's the FAA logic. It's very frustrating, and we met with the regional manager at the time. So it was pretty much as high as we could go. We can have that conversation again. I'm sure we will have that conversation again. But so their logic is, well, before the master plan update was done, it was like, yeah, displaced thresholds. It's basically striping changes.
Mhm.
That's all it is. And then when we're like, okay, master plan's done, we're ready to put in our FAA project for the displaced threshold and get it relabeled and put out on the charts and everything. They were like, nope. And one of the reasons is that you have to demonstrate missed opportunity, essentially. So how many aircraft are not coming to your airport because there's not enough length? And we're like, how are we to know this number? And so, you know, maybe that's something that a consultant could help us with. Otherwise, we don't, like, how do you know? You can't even find out who those people are. It's not like they're here and saying, man, this sucks. This is really hard. We can't take fuel on because we can't, you know, that's not it. It's people who just aren't coming here, and you have to demonstrate. I don't remember the number. Thousands
Oh, was it that? Oh, I thought it was like
of
100.
missed opportunities. Yeah.
So we can't just put a connector in, change the stripe, and call it a day. And beg for forgiveness. That's so nice.
We cannot. I mean, no. It's just getting it. But also, it wouldn't be published.
It seems like the FAA is basically slamming the door on any possible options before we even start.
Well, let's look at another thing, though. I mean, it'd be great to lengthen that runway, but what can we do with what we got? I think from what I hear about hangar space, if we took that south end and put in a few more rows of hangars, they'd probably all be full. Yeah, I don't know exactly how much money that generates, but we could do that with what we have. Now, the part so that would take some real incentives, because like Tony said, I mean, the expense of putting that in, and Rob, I shared with you a few times over the past years where guys have gone down to the planning department, and it's really hard to get that ball rolling. That's an expensive thing. So incentives are going to make a big difference for some people. I don't know exactly what, but it's going to take that type of thing to get that ball rolling for people, because there are people that would be willing to. The next thing is those concerns. So Rob mentioned there up on the north hangars there, we got some that there's leases are tying out here coming up in like 5 years. So my concern, you got to look at this from the long-term standpoint. If somebody owns one of those hangars up there and they want to sell it, and I want to buy into it, and maybe all I get is for 5 years, that won't pay off for me. You know, I'd be better off rent like I am. So the point is, we got to see some long-term stuff and some stuff from the city that it's going to be there. Nobody's going to buy in if they think potentially some of that stuff's going away or leases not being renewed, that type of stuff. And I don't know how to get all those answers to come together because, you know, just the way things are right now. But that's what we need to work on.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Just gonna mention, you made me think of one thing I wanted to to say that I forgot, which is closure. So we have asked about closing airports. Airports do close. The FAA, as much as they don't want to help us make our airport better, they also are loath to lose an airport, especially an airport in the NPS system, which our airports is. So, what are you gonna do with that? But anyway, it's a process. They make the process very, very difficult. And part of that process, as I understand it right now, would be not only would we have to jump through who knows how, we would have to hire a full-time person to manage the closure of the airport. It's so complicated. We would have to pay back the remaining value of the capital investments that we've taken FAA grants for. So like this brand new project we're about to do would be almost 100% have to be paid back. But all of the projects, including the runway rebuild a few years ago, we pay back the value that's remaining on the life of the runway. So millions and millions of dollars would have to be paid back to the FAA. We would probably have to do something with the private hangar owners. We would have to do something. We would have to compensate them in some way. It would factor into that. I don't know. Of course, we have no idea what that might look like, but the city would not just basically abandon those people because they invested in the airport. It would be and then there's the historic part. It's on the national part of it. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. So all of it could not be repurposed for another. It would be very difficult to repurpose the historic features of the airport for something else. So just very, very complicated process. So just in case anybody's thinking that the council is going to vote to close the airport next year and it's just going to cease to exist, it would take years and years and be very expensive, maybe more expensive than keeping it open, right? So all of that has to go into the analysis. And the ideas you're talking about, Gar, are things that would probably come out. It would be like the city needs to invest in this list of things, and then the airport is likely to be viable. So that's kind of what we're hoping.
Okay, how many?
So, for the hangar leases, I know it's coming up 2029 and beyond. But, I almost bought a hangar in Salem and it looked pretty rough. So I talked to the airport manager at that time. This was way before I started. And, for Salem, it was based on condition. The renewal was based on condition. So even if the lease ended and there's no more options, if it was kept well, it looked good, and it's not falling apart, they would renew the lease. Not for like 40 years or anything, but they would renew the lease. So it kind of gave the hangar owners kind of confidence that, hey, you know what, I need to keep this up, otherwise they're not going to renew my lease. But if it was falling apart, they would not renew the lease and knock it down or reuse it or whatever. So that's one way of looking at it, instead of just blanket, no, we're not going to renew it anymore, we're going to take it over, then no one's going to build.
No, I don't think the city. Yeah. So it would be a poor decision for us to not renew a lease and take over a decrepit building. Yeah. Then we would be pouring money into a 30 or 40-year old. So that's fine.
Sorry. So the second part is, instead of building these elaborate, covered hangars with the doors and whatever, we have 16 people on the wait list for just the covered hangars. The electricity, those things should be a lot less expensive to build, and it might be worth it in the long run. Maybe, it'll take a couple of years for the city to kind of recoup the initial investment. But we have the recurring revenue after that, just every single month. And I think people just want to get it out of the element. So as long as there's a roof and it's not leaking, there's electricity for them to preheat or whatever, then I think it might be a really good selling point. And the more people there are, the more fuel they're going to buy, and more operation we're going to have, which means more FAA funding possibly, and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's nothing but good that comes out of more tenants.
Okay, Chuck?
Back to my earlier question, is that something we could form like a subcommittee, and let them go to FAA, find out what's available, or do we have to get city staff first to look at that?
I mean, you guys are welcome to look at what the FAA is available for funding. I think the FAA is probably not going to talk with you a whole lot. But it's on the new grant person, whenever that person is hired, it's on our list to talk about airport projects with them. And it's just something we'll need to look into. But whatever ideas that you can come up with are helpful.
Okay, before Daniel jumps in here, on Tony's comment about the hangars being just covers, if they're designed properly, maybe at some point in the future, they could be enclosed.
Yeah.
And that makes them even more attractive. Okay, Daniel? And
Well,
Jerry, let me, one more. Chris, how long do you want to spend on this?
Well, I mean, it's your meeting, so
Okay.
however long you guys
Daniel?
look at it.
Well, I just say about open hangars is that's a good place to get your plane worked on. They don't charge you. Just costs you to put it back together.
Okay. Anybody else?
So,
That's right.
No.
I was gonna say, I think, he had the idea of having, I can't remember what you call it, an outside.
Consult
through and consult, yeah, thanks. Come through and kind of think of feasibility, but I think at some point, if the city looks at it, realizes, it's here to stay and puts that out that, hey, we're into it for the long haul, and it really makes incentives to maybe put in some hangar stuff. I think you could ease some tension and you get more interest that way. But right now, there's a lot of people that just don't know where it's going. And as you know, you stated there's been some comments made that went out there that's not helpful for this airport.
No.
And so at some point, it could just take a turning point where, once again, it's here to stay. And
Yeah.
I think that would go a long ways.
Some great things happen. There
And
are many with the FBO and then from there, classes teaching young kids how to, come in and get the pilot's license and, with the museum, if we can teach kids how to build a model airplane, I think there's great things happening.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's sort of like everything else new again. This is, from what I understand, kind of exactly where the city was in 2000. So I agree. And I just want everybody to know that I feel like I've been on around the ringer with the airport, and it's not a comfortable place to be, to have the council direction to just be like, figure out what to do with this. So I agree with you. We do need some better direction, and I don't know that we can give them that direction. I feel like we need some outside help.
the council doesn't know anything that staff doesn't tell them. So ultimately, it's going to be up to you to go to the city council and say, we've got to do this, this, and you're going to recommend this or this. That's just the way it has to work, because you have to advise. So you brought us to a point, but you've dropped us.
Well, because I don't have the expertise to know, like, we don't know.
That's why the consultant.
So, right, and what will end up being, and the consultant, I'm sure will engage this group. I'm positive we will require them to do that. And it will be, their recommendation, and then it has to filter through our minds of like, is it feasible? Because we're the ones that are gonna have to live with it. And then that's what will go to the council. So they'll hear from the group.
Okay,
And then,
I have to cut you off. So one more time, Aaron, or, Nathan?
I just remember this consultant, is there anybody responsible for doing any kind of marketing? And things like the fact that we have people on a wait list. There's people that are coming off the wait list because they're going on the list. There's people coming back. Who's responsible for doing something like that? Doing some kind of market analysis to see what makes sense.
Yeah, that's what would be part of it. I mean, it's part of the challenge. The city has an economic development staff of like 1.5. But it's for the entire city. And so, and they aren't really experts on the airport. We've engaged them and they're like, I don't know, this is what works for others. So it would be part of it. If their recommendation is, here's what you do, part of that would be like a marketing approach and, how to get the word back out, again, that the city's operating a Senate disorder, whatever it is that the recommendations come up with. So.
Okay. You mentioned students who done this too?
Yeah, we have a study from the Williams University MBA group, and that's available if you're interested.
Okay.
Okay, Sean, back to you.
Is every lease at the airport current?
Yes.
The tie down for the Bushman Cove?
Oh, God, that guy.
Yep.
Yeah, everybody's up to date, I think. We get,
Jay is
yeah,
correct.
so we get an aging report from finance. Year, semi-annually, yeah.
Great. That's a huge improvement over a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I'll wrap it up, if I may, by saying that whatever consulting firm you bring in here, they definitely need to have an aviation background
Oh, yeah.
or experience. Otherwise,
There's only my extensive research so far, Google, there's not very many.
And then when they do come and apply, they kind of overblow their.
Well,
Yeah, well, I've listened to it and it's kind of funny. They can do anything. Got magic dust.
Okay. All right, Chris, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I want
sorry.
Rob, I want to make a request because it's been bandied about here about the leases that are coming, at expiration in 29, et cetera. We saw that list of, I'll use the term codes, and those codes make no sense to me. Is there a way I can know that this code means this place? Is that available?
I think I had the address on there.
I don't recall seeing any.
Yeah, there's a number, the
Yeah.
first column was a number, the hangar number or the address.
Yeah, I think it was your address.
375, 425.
Yeah. So 305 is like the most, the most north.
Okay, I guess I'll get with Tony and find out what that means. It makes no sense to me.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so Rob, you're next up.
Dates. You want to get out of here?
No,
Well, we're in the process of our loan or our grant for the FAA right now, and that's a $2.2 million taxiway lighting upgrade at Happy's. So it's been back and forth crazy, and Jeff Bond decision has been awesome with that. So we're just getting to the point to where we're going to go out to bid here in about a month. So and the whole process will start. So we've done all the environmentals, we've got everything prepared, we've been approved for a core grant. It's basically to get the grant and go out to bid. And I mentioned to Tony, there's going to be some closures. When I know specifically, I will let everybody know. There's going to be for the fog seal, it's going to be a 24-hour closure. For pouring the pads of the Happies, there's going to be, I think they said a 2-day closure for that from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then there's going to be some just taxiway A or B closures to where you might have to go through the middle and then come back down and take off. So
Do you foresee any back taxiing on the runway required?
possibly,
Okay.
yep. So, and we'll keep, once I find out the dates, and Jeff Vaughn was gonna send me something that just kind of had, how many days it might be. That once we find out, construction will try and give you guys as much advance notice as we can.
And how, is it you or Tony that does the NOTAMs?
I'll probably do the notice
And how far in advance do you foresee doing that?
as far as I can. So once I find out, it'll be immediate, let everybody know. I'll usually contact Tony and he can post something out there as well. So,
Any chance of combining the sewer and those schools?
there's gonna be a sewer project out there that day. So, I don't know, this year there will not be a closure for that.
Oh,
So the next phase, next year, that's when that would happen. So, I don't know how long that would be, trying to keep it to them.
The Interceptor?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably not till summer of 26.
And then, other than that, it's basically, just carrying on with, the basic stuff. And, we had a water line break in the, historic hangar. We're getting that replaced and fixed, so that's good to go. Other than that, it's like Chuck asked about mowing. We're gonna start mowing here as soon as we can get on, the field. It's still pretty wet right now. It's been sunny for a few days, but we'll probably get out and mow around the jet soon. And on the field as soon as the ground hurts up. So spraying, we'll start spraying on these night days as well. I don't know, just been swamped with everything, a lot of things with.
is that coming here?
Yeah.
Understood.
Yep, sun comes out, people start walking and, you get sidewalk complaints, pothole complaints. Airport grass is growing like crazy. I think that's basically all I have for staff updates at this time. So,
Okay, Tony?
Oh. Okay, so, I have a few things. What I'm going to do is, the fuel cells have been good. I'm like the lowest in the valley. So, why not? I get all these airplanes that I haven't seen for like years. Coming up, like, hey, I don't know what you look like, man. But anyway, yeah, they're coming in. We're getting a new load on Monday, so the price will go up a little bit. But we'll still be, on the lower end or the lowest. And, like to help out, the city gets the fuel free from me. So the way I say it, the more I sell it, the better it will be for the city. So, I'll do my part. And, and then, one thing I noticed is, a lot of our student pilots, they become private pilots. Not all of them are career track. So if they're career track, they're just going to go through the motion, go get their hours, and they're out of it, right? But we still have a lot of students that just want to fly for recreational purposes, right? Like Nathan, right? And then they end up getting an airplane like Nathan, or they don't have an airplane, so they end up not flying at all, and then they lose everything, right? They lose the currency, proficiency, and everything. And when they come to me, and we're too busy to rent out an airplane just for, for one-off kind of thing, because our schedule is pretty booked in the summertime. So what I've been talking to about with AOPA is forming a flying club. It'll be an equity flying club. Maybe, depending on how many initial members I could wrangle up together, maybe, one or two airplanes, and it'll be based on, there's no hangar space, so it'll be out on the ramp. But I think, that will kind of address that issue with the private pilots that have nothing to fly or don't have access to a rental aircraft. So that's coming up. I have to go through some state for a nonprofit and there's a bunch of stuff. So I'm hoping by beginning or middle of summer, we'll have a flying club at the airport. And then, so it's going to be totally separate from Infinite Air Center. I don't want anything to do with it, seriously. But I'm going to help form it and then fund it a little bit. And then, after that, it's on their own. Okay. And then, let's see. And then ODAR, so Oregon Disaster Airlift Response Team. Albany is one of the staging airports for the Willamette Valley. So we're pretty much in charge of, so all of our supplies are coming from Bend Depot, in case of Cascadia event or whatever disaster happens. They'll fly to Albany, from Albany, it'll be distributed to the coastal areas, like central coastal areas of Oregon. So like Newport, maybe, no, not Florence, maybe Florence, like Lincoln City and all that stuff. So, we're planning on this emergency. And then one of the things that got brought up was communication. And Mel's spearheading that communication portion, because we have to expect everything to be down, right? Cell phone's going to be down. There's not going to be landline. Internet's not going to be operational. So the only thing we have at this point is ham radio. So we're thinking we need to address the ham radio and communications. And also we're talking with Eagles or American Eagles. What's that?
Yeah, the Eagles.
Eagles, okay. Well, yeah, they want to provide some go boxes where they have emergency stuff where we could just, if there's an emergency, we're going to put it in the airplane and we're going to take it wherever it needs to go. So I'm going to use one of our south buildings for that. So that's really not a problem. But the thing is the fuel situation. We don't have backup power. We don't have generators. I've been kind of toying with this idea, but I don't know. I mean, we're not really getting anywhere. We're getting any concrete like options. So, and I think the majority of that was driven by the cost to install it, and maybe the cost of the equipment and the maintenance of it and upkeep. So, what ODART is going to do is they have grants available. I think the Department of Human Services, or one of those departments have a huge grant available for disaster, right? So they're going to apply for it, and I'm going to ask for generators, the installation of it, shelving, pallet jacks, and whatever else we need. And the communications equipment will be like a portable thing, but we need to house it somewhere. So what we were thinking is, I know young Marines used to have like that big shed on the side of the building where they had the cans and whatever supplies they had at the airport property, south of the FBO building. So I was like, well, could we get like a big storage shed? I mean, of course, it'll be part of the grant that we apply for. But I know you had issues with my trailer idea last time, so I wanted to run that by you.
I'll say no. I think what we could do, we're gonna have open space in one of our hangars over there. Maybe we could store it in there.
In the city-owned cover hang?
Yeah.
Okay.
So where the parks department is, we're gonna move all the paper storage out of there.
Move the coin hanger.
Yeah. So I don't know if that might be a possibility, but I know we're gonna stage in that area on the south end of the FBO for the construction project coming up.
Oh.
So one thing I was gonna talk to you about.
Oh, okay. Well, but as long as, the storage shed was so we could put the communication equipment and whatever else we need. So as long as there's space for it, we don't really care where it is. But the generator, if it's portable, it's going to have to be there. And if it's one of those bigger, more permanent generators that hook up with the transfer switch and stuff like that, that would have to be installed, and it'll be against the wall by the FBO building. So it's just going to power the fuel equipment, and then we'll just flip the switch, and so we still have access to fuel. So the way our fuel terminal is configured is, I don't have a manual switch. I have to put in my card for the fuel to dispense, even if, without going to the credit card. I have a supervisor card that needs to go in. So without electricity to that terminal, I can't turn on that fuel pump at all. So that's why we need a generator with a transfer switch that will power the pump, and the terminal, and the dispenser.
All that'll be covered in the grant.
Well, actually, yeah, that's what we're shooting for. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what we have coming, and then we have Whale Run coming up, which is our exercise. I think it's June or July, right? Yeah. So we'll do the same thing like we did last year. They'll bunch of our airplanes will fly in. We'll store it in my storage, and then the next day we'll ship it out or fly it out to wherever it's needed.
Actually, I think they're working on 2 weekends one weekend it'll be brought in and then the next weekend they'll take it out. For whatever reason, they've decided to split it up. That way it's not putting everything in one basket.
And then, you know, weather comes into play and stuff like that.
One question, Tony, you got the big reader board that's supposed to go on the dispenser terminal?
Yes.
What's the status on that?
Well, we need it mounted, and I'm working with the city, Scott or
Change.
Shane, okay. Shane on the electrical connection, yeah. So once we get it, it'll be nice. I mean, it looks really nice, but they're very proud of it. So, yeah. All right, that's it for me.
Okay. Rob?
I'm just glad to be part of this. So,
Nathan?
That's it.
Chuck?
Oh, gosh. Please bear with me. I got a bunch of items in open discussion. Is there anything this group could volunteer to help you with that would relieve you of some?
Doing pretty good right now.
Is the FBO lease on an annual increase?
Let me back up. If somebody wants to pressure wash,
Yes.
essentially the jets, spring, we could probably provide a pressure washer. I don't want to rip the paint off, but we could probably clean it up a little bit. That might be an option.
Good.
So, yeah,
What are you pressure washing?
the jet,
The A4s?
safe bar.
Oh,
The FBO lease, is it an annual, is it?
It never expires, Chuck.
Year lease.
In my ninth year, so I think end of this year, we need to, yeah, February 1st, 2025, they'll expire.
So, that didn't answer my question. Is there a CPI in the FBO lease?
I don't believe so. No.
Wow.
And we like it like that,
Might I suggest that when the term is up, at least at that time? Would that,
We'll negotiate with our tenant.
Can? You know what's going, oh, I know, I mean, I have space over there.
We will be raising lease rates when we do re-roof the hangars. There will be, I don't know, like,
The FBO is 20% now, right? And then I imagine most of it's fuel, so even CPI, how much could that possibly add?
no, he
We're talking
pays,
penny
he
stuff,
pays, it's nominal, but he pays $1,500 a month.
It was 1,500
Right.
when I initially started, yeah.
Okay.
That was 9 years ago.
So,
Chuck.
yeah, 4% of 2,000.
Oh, yeah, 2,000 sounds good, yeah.
City staff is using a hangar at the airport. Is the equivalent city charge what we could get from a retail renter? Is it close? Is it,
I
think it's more.
Yeah.
okay. So the internal city
We charge the
transfer,
city managers.
okay. Thank you.
They don't like it.
The boot behind Jay's unit.
There it is.
Yeah.
a boat.
There's a
Those are floats.
Those are floats for a plane. Airplane.
What is the city's policy at the airport regarding storing vehicles next to the hangar? Is it forbidden or?
It's not preferred. I know a
just
lot of the
not
stuff that they, some of the guys have trailers there that they're
Yes.
saying it's airport related things that they have in their trailers.
Yes. Truck and trailer
I don't
next to
know.
315.
Uh,
You write letters every year for these things, right? Is it worth it?
We send letters, I mean, the land leases are for the footprint of the building and that is all. And so every time, we
Should
send
we offer them
letters, we
Let's
put
offer them alternative, $150 a month, park their trailer there.
tow stickers on things. Yeah, well, part of the challenge is you don't want it to turn into
They will.
a camper
They'll take you-
parking area.
Yeah, they'll
If
take
they
you
need
up
to park their camper, they can go find an RV parking place and store their camper. We would prefer that they not store things between the hangars, but it's just a constant.
Well, is that a fire deal to have?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's lots of reasons, but it's also usually ends up leaking, like it's just a mess. But it's just a constant thing. I mean, it's just,
I understand, but I just looking for a source of revenue.
yeah, I appreciate that.
The trailer, the enclosed trailer that's over by the jet, I suppose that's temporary?
Yes. Yeah. I gave them permission to do that. For
The T hangers, building 305. It appears that there is nothing in two of them. Today, there is nothing in two of them.
I just rented, we have guy, number 11 left,
Right,
and that April 1st, we'll have somebody in it. And the other open one is
number
being,
4.
is being leased. I think the guy was buying a plane.
In the junk in 6, the 2 fuselages, look shitty, but
It's hard to, I mean, it's airport related items again, that they're planes, they're fuselages.
And the rent's being paid.
Yes. It's not a car parked in there, a trailer being stored inside of there, or boats.
don't want to rock that boat. Last thing. 2 years ago, I started a phone survey of other airports to see what, I'm gonna say 3 years ago, what lease rates were at other airports. I was 3/4 finished when one of the respondents said, "That's funny, the state of Oregon is airport commissioner
Released a study.
a study." I got a copy of that study, and we were substantially under on several items. Some of them have been improved. I'd like to make a motion today, and I solicit someone's second or support to raise the T hanger rates an additional $20. Because when that survey was done 3 years ago, we were about $50 to $75 under any other airport. We are still significantly under any other
It does
airport.
have power. Because that was the.
I make a motion that we raise the rate for the existing T hangers.
Chuck has made the
Are
motion.
you talking about the open hangar?
The open T hanger.
Chuck has made a motion. Is there a second?
I think we need to discuss it.
Can we discuss it real quick?
Well, we have to have a second before we can discuss.
We have to have a second before we can have discussion.
I'll second.
Just for discussion.
Okay, there's been a second. Now let's open for discussion. Gar?
So I'm trying to think how many years ago it was we upped the rate, then a year or two later upped the rate again. And so,
80 to 115, I believe.
so there's 115 today, that's my next question.
Right,
What was the-
my opinion is nobody's gonna move out 115 versus 125. My opinion is.
I'm sorry, what was the $80?
Probably 8 years ago.
Oh, it was just up to 115.
Yeah, probably.
The last balance was
3 years ago. 3 years ago.
Yeah, we raised it twice in 1 year.
Well,
I think that was like 2018 or 2019 or something like that.
But John was here then, I believe. That was the case.
I would like to see the data before I vote on it.
Wouldn't that be a good idea?
So I'm not going to, I can't negate your motion, but I would beg that we get to see the data before we vote on the motion. So I could make one motion that we table this motion until we review the data, and then we can bring this one off of the table.
So who has the does city staffs retain the state's survey information?
I think I have it. I'll have to look.
Right here, you make the second?
I say your question.
Okay. So there has been a motion made to table Chuck's motion pending that we get to review the data, and it has been seconded. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to table Chuck's motion?
Aye.
You don't get to go
Approved. Oh, no. So the motion to raise the rates on the T hangers has been tabled pending review of the data. Okay. So, Chuck, are you done with your issues?
I am, thank you for the time.
Okay. Gar?
I was gonna ask, I seen that trailer up there by that citation. Are they?
Yeah, it's going to Corvallis.
They're gonna take it apart.
It's gonna fly.
Oh, wow. That'd be interesting.
It's all be there when you want it.
And they said how far out? Expect
You should try.
Do they know how soon? How soon do they plan?
Probably next week or within the next couple of weeks. I think the weather is looking pretty bad next week anyway, but, so they put it, we were gonna put in about 500 gallons of fuel. So I think it's going to Hillsborough, because that's where the owner.
Oh, and
Yeah, the Premier Jets out of Hillsborough.
Okay,
Yeah, well, he also owns the Corvallis FBO.
Yeah.
So I think
you're right.
Okay, I don't have anything, so let's move on to business from the public. Ms. Orator?
Thank you. So an update on the historic project with the 1929 hangar. With the great help of Chris, we are moving along. So we have a mission, a vision, and we just started with our long and short-term goals. So it looks like if everything goes okay, that possibly in June that we would sign the lease with the city, and then the fiscal sponsorship with the museum. So under the control of the museum. They would.
Anything else?
You're gonna give an update to the council.
Yes, so I'm sorry. We'll give it, I was sitting here thinking, uh-oh, what are we gonna say? We give an update to the council on April 8th, which is Monday. So we've gone over presentation, and Mark Baxter, who's my buddy working on the project, will be there, and our liaison person, Kristen Preston, will be there too. So
April 8th.
April 8th, it's a Monday.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, I would just add to the discussion is I'm wondering what business aviation, I think they put out a magazine. What kind of help that they could offer in looking at the airport, and what you have to do to bring this business jets in, besides having the length that they need to come in and take off on. But I just wondered what they might be able to offer.
And it was mentioned that we don't need to just look at the jet traffic. We can look at the turboprops, the King Air, stuff like that as well.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Daniel? All right. Anybody online?
Just me. I do need to ask something, and thank you very much to Ron. When that water line broke, Luke called me and said there's a puddle outside the doors of the big hangar, and so then I called Rob and he got on it right away. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, I can't believe how much PVC / galvanized pipe, PVC, galvanized, that thing has been repaired 10 times.
The airport looks as good right now as I've seen it. Shut up.
Well, thank you.
Okay. One last shot. Anybody got anything?
I'll help play. I mean, everybody else. I mean, I'll help.
Yeah, let's set
Yeah,
something
we'll
up in
work
the
together.
spring and, our meeting was.
I'll just help you, whatever.
Sure.
Okay.
Tony, are you around tomorrow? Are you around tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah, in the afternoon, after 1 o'clock.
Okay, after one?
Mhm.
Oh, I'll swing out and talk about generator and stuff.
Okay.
All that.
Okay.
All right, at 4:55, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Have a good evening, everybody.